Hi there, welcome to Funding by Alex. I'm Alex, and today I would like to talk to you about non dilutive funding. So, what is non dilutive funding? Basically, when you normally get funding from an investor, equity, meaning shares in your company, leave your hands and go to an investor. Normally, new shares are issued, but sometimes you don't want to give out equity or you want to grow without actually giving up equity in a very early stage. So that's the core of non-dilutive funding, that no equity changes hands. Now, the sources of non-dilutive funding can be grants or subsidies. So there are various agencies, mainly the government, that give out grants and subsidies to mainly innovative startups, but there could be sectors like, when you're very much environmental friendly, or you have a great idea to, make certain sectors more efficient in the economy. That can be, a source of funding. So normally it helps and it pays off also to search your government's websites. Basically all the government websites, Ministry for Economic Affairs normally has that for these innovation funds that they have, these startup funds. Also they are trying to stimulate startups to come into the country, because startups equal innovation. If in essence you can wait for this eccentric rich guy to hand you a bag of money, but it might also be able to come from the government, or to for some extent from the government. So part of it is funded by that, from that source. Then there are a lot of contests where also larger companies and corporate companies of corporates are looking for innovation. So they normally have problems that they find for a solution, or you have a contest for startups, like the most innovative startup, in the hope, of course, that they can stimulate the growth of these startups and at some point acquire them, or at least acquire what they're working on. So corporates, it sounds maybe a bit strange, but like it sounds to you like, oh, these guys have so many resources to deploy, and that is true. It's just that to innovate, you need to be, small or lean and mean, as they call it. You need to be hungry also for innovation. Normally, you see people, brilliant people, actually leaving a corporate to, found a startup, to become a founder in a startup, and it's even promoted by these corporates to start these smaller companies rather than trying to invent something or being an entrepreneur inside a big company. Larger companies normally have quite a lot of red tape, quite a lot of things like, we've always done things this way. So your entire company is already, populated by people who are, doing a job and having a certain function, and maybe clinging on to power inside the company. So startups normally have these very flat, founders, and then they hire the first few people, and you are more lean to more flexible to go into different directions, pivot. If this doesn't work, I'll try that tomorrow, that sort of thing. Now that's basically where startup contests actually connect to corporates. So corporates and startups are, it sounds a bit like the enemy sometimes. Oh, we want to disrupt corporates business, which is most extent true, but corporates in the end also are looking to integrate that sort of innovation in their company. So startup contest prize money can be a very good source for you for non-dilutive funding, because you don't give up shares. Sometimes it does involve giving up shares, but that is, part of the contract, and you can agree to it upfront or not. Then crowdfunding also comes in several flavors. You have equity crowdfunding, which actually, equity is given out by crowdfunding in some cases, like for example Kickstarter. There's a lot of good examples around where Kickstarter has really launched or like propelled a startup into the stratosphere with regards to being funded with crowdfunding, where people simply donate money in order to get maybe the product, or bragging rights for, I've funded this startup. So in the end, Kickstarter had evolved a little bit into, which or like deteriorated, as they say, into a sort of pre-order store. That is actually what the criticism said. Like, I'm not saying that myself. I'm saying merely what was written about it. That you basically put a product there that doesn't exist yet. People can order it and they prepay. Therefore, they crowdfund your product or your product development in some cases. Now, a lot of these products actually that have been announced and have been in development, there are some scams as well. So, people are actually putting things on crowdfunding platforms that don't exist yet, and maybe they underestimate, maybe with the best intentions, they underestimated, the amount of work, or maybe the leap in technological developments that was needed to, get from A to Z in this case. And in some cases, people are just, very opportunistic and didn't really do the math in order to, put things on there. But when you look at startups, Kickstarter is a source. There are also other crowdfunding platforms that are more geared towards startups, maybe more towards certain verticals. Then revenue-based financing. So revenue-based financing is actually only interesting for companies that actually have revenue. So if you are pre-revenue, so you don't have revenue yet, then you don't look at this option yet. But if you have revenue and you say, hey, I would like to, get an advance on my future revenue, that is normally the way they finance it. Then you promise a portion of the future revenue until the amount you borrowed, in essence, is paid up. So that's what revenue-based financing is, and the ceiling can go up the more revenue you create, of course. It's risky, so it's not free. The risk is also paid in terms of interest. Then you have loans and credit. Of course, there are quite a lot of banks and other financial institution, non-bank financial institution, fintech companies that are offering a variety of loans and other credit facilities, basically. So these things are, also sources for credit. Usually, governments also have this sort of thing. So whether this is for you or not, maybe that depends on a couple of factors. So innovative startups, they may qualify for grants, etc. So normally it's innovation driven. So if you have a startup, you say, hey, I would like to sell stuff that I make in China and I'm selling on an e-commerce platform, and that's it. Yeah, innovation will be very low because you are basically selling ready-made products and you're not innovating anything other than you buy low and you sell high, basically. So in the end, trading is not a part of innovation. A lot of industries that are, obviously, anything tech related normally could qualify for that. Medical, biotech, various agri-tech things are mainly, when you could put tech behind it, I would say is probably already an indication. Anything AI related at this moment is very hot, obviously. Before it was Web3. Web3 was also quite an interesting, interesting thing a couple of years ago. Of course, related. Crypto related startups also had a flurry of innovation about them, like decentralized finance, basically. Um, in essence, there is a lot of funds for this sort of thing. So you have different funds for different startups, also actually entertainment, arts, science, creative funds as well. So, for example, for the games industry, there is quite a lot of this stuff about. So, you can actually qualify for a lot of different things if you spend the time to look for it. So just Google it or run it through ChatGPT. Then it's actually also very easy to let ChatGPT do the. That's another innovation, by the way. So if you have revenue and you want to grow without giving up equity, of course, the revenue-based financing part is interesting. So normally. When you're small and you have no revenue, this might not be for you. So in the end, this is something that needs a certain base value to work for you. So without revenue, you can't do revenue based financing. But there are a lot of companies that say, okay, I have a product, I have customers, and I need to bridge the gap between the time I am making it, I need to pay my bills, versus like the time I get paid by my customers. Now, there's a lot of stuff that is, no need to actually go to investors and pitch your idea. You can actually finance that through many other ways. So, if you need more information about that, like I said, I'm available. I will share my email at the end of the the video. Then, if you have a consumer facing business, it doesn't have to be consumer facing business necessarily, but I wrote it down here because it's easier to do it with a consumer facing business. You have to imagine crowdfunding is just people like you and me. So we come across a crowdfunding project, and if you know, company XYZ that you've never heard of that is doing something very, very high tech, and you don't know exactly what it is and how feasible it is and all those things, it might be less inclined to crowdfund that and part with your money for that, other than, let's say, if you have a company that is opening a retail business, meaning restaurants or maybe a store or something like that, or something very visible. Could be also something that gathers a lot of publicity. That's basically what I'm trying to say here. Could also therefore be B2B, but normally consumer facing is more in your face type of stuff. Yeah, you have an emotional feeling about maybe a restaurant that you or a store that you visit frequently, and owning a piece of that. So in essence, you're owning a piece of that if you look at crowdfunding as a business, or you give money to it from a crowdfunding perspective. So these things are easier when the business has a lot of exposure in the media, and you can go there, you can touch it, and all those things. So normally this sort of stuff also works quite well for creative projects, therefore. So creative projects like games or books or board games also are quite often funded this way, where you do crowdfunding sort of thing. So a new board game, for example. But it could also be something of an electronics nature. So basically there are people who have, for example, new games console, or a new type of computer, or a new device that helps you sleep better at night. All these things are, yeah, basically all able to yeah, gather the attention of crowdfunding, because it makes the world a little bit more fun, or a little bit better to live in, and therefore it's easier to find and easier to relate to. So that is, I think, also a bit, because in the end, investors are people, and small investors, meaning like people who donate $10, or maybe someone who donates $10 million is another story. But I mean, they're all people. It doesn't matter of what the size of the check is, but um, someone has to be moved to do that. So that's actually where crowdfunding and I think any investment cycle actually comes in, where someone has to believe in it and relate to it and say, okay, what the heck, I'll invest my money into that. Then last, basically, I would like to point out that a higher risk will mean also a higher interest on your loans. So if you actually borrow money, so meaning revenue-based financing, or the loans that are available, so anything that requires you to repay, it's not only repaying, but you also will, yeah, from fintech companies, definitely non-bank institutions, because banks won't lend to you. Well, yeah, you can't borrow from banks because the risk is too high. Banks have a more risk averse profile. They look different at risk. So I'm saying banks are also trying to help, of course, the economy, but their profile is more about security and locking everything down. And in order to borrow $100,000, you have to have $100,000 in your account. It defeats the purpose a bit of borrowing $100,000 if you have $100,000. But I mean, that was basically the point with regards to yeah, banks and risk. So higher risk, meaning anyone who is willing to take a bet on you if you have an unproven concept, unproven startup, is taking a higher risk. So they are taking a risk on you by lending money to you, and therefore, yeah, you will have to pay more interest. So in the end, it will be more expensive. The cost of capital will be higher. So this is just part of the game. You can't really get away from it. I've had a couple of clients who were very surprised that crowdfunding, for example, if it was equity crowdfunding or crowdfunding in essence that it was an expensive exercise, that you also have to pay high dividends for equity crowdfunding, you have to pay high dividends to your crowdfunders, or that anything from a non-bank institution is a more expensive source of credit. So yeah, what did you expect in the end? Yeah, so in the end, it is a matter of banks are probably the cheapest source of credit still, or cheapest, the least expensive source of credit. Let me rephrase. Therefore, yeah, if you go to a fintech or any other non-bank financial institution, yeah, you have to pay for the additional risk they're willing to take on you. So that's why basically the risk is higher, therefore the interest is higher. I'll leave you here with that. As promised, if you want to send me an email and ask me a question about this topic, alex@goldendragoncapital.co, so not .com but .co. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you like the video. If not, then don't. I definitely hope to see you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.